Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. It's our last event of the year. I want to extend a warm welcome to all of our incredible panelists who've taken the time out to join us, as well as obviously all the individuals who are signed in. I'm Madeleine Weightman. I'm co-founder of The Work Crowd. The Work Crowd is an online network of freelancers working across the marketing, communications and PR mix. We've built a digital platform which supports our community and allows businesses to connect to the right talent that they need from within our network to help them power and scale their business. Today, we really wanted to have a roundup of the year that's been 2021 and very much look ahead at 2022. 2021 has been a funny year without a shadow of a doubt. Obviously, businesses have been trying to get back to a new normal. We've seen a huge boom in the number or demand for freelancers, certainly here at the Work Crowd. I was looking at the stats, something like a 65% increase in client registrations and projects in Q2 and Q3 versus Q1, and actually a similar number in terms of freelancer registrations. So today I wanted to sort of really hand over to our panelists to look at emerging trends, for our panelists to really share their insights, looking at what's happening within the industry in the year ahead into 2022. So I'm going to hand over to our panelists to introduce themselves. I'll start with you, Adam. So if you can just say a few words about yourself and your background.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining. I'm a former journalist. I worked for 25 years. I worked for a lot of the tabloids, BBC, ITV as a reporter, and then concentrated on trying to get a job at the Times, which I did. I was there for 20 years. I think they just forgot to get rid of me. Worked for the paper as a general news reporter, went online, started and was beginning to be taken seriously. I was asked to go there to be the news editor of the online section, then went to the news desk of the paper as a news editor, before going back on the road as a senior reporter and crime correspondent. I left the Times 10 years ago to go to the darker side of PR and worked for a PR agency with offices in London, New York, San Francisco, looking after a variety of different clients from Equinox to Nokia to Madeleine to Battersea Power Station, doing lots of media training, crisis comms and traditional PR strategy. And then 5 years ago went out on my own and been doing a lot of crisis comms and media training, and we'll talk a bit later on about how companies are now doing more, concentrating on their messaging, making sure they get that right. And that's the 30-second tour of my professional life.
Thanks, Adam. No, that's great. So if we can hand over to you now, Susan, if you can say a little bit about yourself.
Hi, yeah, I'm Susan Brownlow. I have spent 30 years in communications, starting off in advertising with Saatchi & Saatchi, and then through various sort of, other jobs, moving into, as Adam said, the dark side of PR, which I have been focused on really for the last sort of 18 years or so. Mainly heading up large international industrial corporations of the global role. So traveling very, very extensively, pretty much in and out of Heathrow and other airports every week. And that is one of the driving reasons I have become a freelancer. Yeah, I still work largely with either very large NGOs or with large corporations around the energy transition and climate, and then sort of broader sustainability as well. And that's probably less than 30 seconds, but that's me in a nutshell.
Thank you, Susan. I think some people are having a few problems hearing you, but I don't think that's a general, but yeah, just, I think we'll get close to our computers so everyone is super clear. So I'm going to hand over now to Samantha. If you can just give us a little bit of background about you.
Sure. So I've always been in PR for about 17 years. I've been in agency and in-house, and I've always sort of freelanced in between some of my roles, but this year decided to go out on my own, and I work with a lot of clients directly. I've been in-house at Debenhams, BT, Singapore Airlines and Bowden. And agency-wise, I've been at Fleischmann Hillard and Three Monkeys, are probably two of the biggest ones. Brands I've worked with vary very much in the consumer and entertainment space. So I launched the AMC TV channel over here in the UK. I've worked with Morrison's, Tesco, TGI Fridays, Prezzo, The Body Shop. So my experience has always been varied, but it's always very much focused on integrated campaigns, and probably in the last decade, always sort of digital first led activity and lots of influencer and social media work as well.
Brilliant. Thanks, Sam. And then finally, but not least, obviously, Grace, if you can tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Thank you, Madeleine. Hi, everyone. I'm Grace Ashton. I'm the founder of One Face Brands. It's a brand and marketing consultancy, and I look at campaign management and brand and marketing strategy and execution. I've 10 years experience across the entire sort of brand marketing mix, working with bigger brands, global brands such as Red Bull, EE, Tuborg, Durex, and also more sort of startups and SMEs, such as Hustle. Like I said, I've worked across sort of brand and marketing strategy, multi-channel campaign management, content production, event management. My focus really is on brand first. So as Adam said, getting that kind of messaging right, getting the brand mission and vision and values and personality across in everything that a brand does, in order to have that kind of consistent and trustworthy experience with consumers. So the idea behind One Face Brands is to provide sort of smaller businesses and founders of startups with the kind of skills and experience and processes and ideas that I've kind of garnered from working with the bigger brands. Now, so I work with a variety of businesses, startups, small businesses, and established brands on campaign management, as well as personal branding for consultants and entrepreneurs as well.
Brilliant, that's great, thanks. Now, before we kick off, what I would like to say to everyone who's joined us, there is some Q&A right down at the bottom, so do feel free. There'll be 10 sort of 15 minutes at the end that we'll address some Q&A, but I'll also be keeping an eye on them as our panelists are talking. So if there are questions that you'd like to ask specifically of our panelists, I would encourage you to participate in that Q&A. So I want us to start off actually having a chat with you, Adam. We've obviously just sort of entered, or I'd say we've left, but we're still probably doing it. We've had let's say the world's biggest work from home experiment. There's obviously been a real shift in terms of the priorities for many during COVID. And businesses have really had to rethink about how they can reach and communicate to their customers. I wanted to just sort of ask you, as obviously someone who's come from that journalist background but moved into PR specifically, what trends you've seen in the industry and what you feel will be important in the year ahead.
Sure. I think for a lot of brands, it's being authentic, which has always been the case, but I think that's becoming more apparent over the last 18 months, that you really, to connect with your customer base, you have to be authentic, you have to be seen to be doing what you preach and keeping the messaging simple. I think the days of convoluted, trying to be clever campaigns is not gone, because when it's done properly, it works really well. But keeping the messaging simple and authentic is a really good way to very easily connect with the customer base. And more brands are using social media. We're at home more. We've got more time to scroll through our phone every day. And a recent study by TikTok found that 67% of their users were aged over 25. So it's not maybe the market you think it is. It's older, and it's a great way to showcase your company, what you stand for, without it being seen as an advert. It's a real window into who you are, and again goes back to connecting in an authentic way. Influencers have become more powerful, and they're a great way to connect with the audience. But I think, again, it comes down to, are they authentic? If the customer sees that they're just doing it for the money, and what they show on social media is something completely different to what they're doing in real life, it just doesn't work and can actually have an adverse effect. But that's I'll let Samantha talk more about that. That's not my area of expertise. I'm also working with I work a lot with one of the world's best etiquette experts, who advises brands, individuals, on how best to present themselves in the right way. I think that's ever becoming ever more important as well. A stunt is always good fun if it works well. It can be expensive, but the ROI is good if it's executed properly. However, one trend in PR that will always remain is being able to give a journalist a good story with the right assets at the right time, the video, pictures, a good case study. And it doesn't just mean looking at the right publication, the right journalist. It's about making sure you pitch your stories for the right day. A Saturday newspaper is very different to a Monday newspaper. But as I mentioned in the intro, messaging is becoming ever more important. I'll be called to do media training for a CEO, and the end of the session will be me repeating back to them what they think they do, because a lot of board CEOs, C-suite, they're used to using the language in their boardroom that they talk to about each other, but it doesn't necessarily connect with the consumer. So it's as a journalist, it's my job, a former journalist, my job to take the information they give me and give it back to them in a way that can be easily consumed by the audience. So I think it boils down to connecting, as it always has done, being authentic, but really making sure you're getting the messaging right and making it very simple. I think that there's no point trying to be over clever in how you sell something. You really have to hit people hard with who you are, what you are from the off.
And so you've talked about messaging being really key and obviously authentic in your messaging. I think during lockdown, but also post lockdown, I think a lot of businesses have had to rethink about how they can connect or reconnect in a lot of cases with their customers. You mentioned obviously TikTok. Are you seeing changes in the way that businesses are both, I suppose, going about how they connect with their customers, but also the channels or the mediums that they use to do that?
Yeah, I think the days of just getting something online or in a newspaper are long gone. It has to be a multi-targeted approach if you can afford to do that, and not everyone can. It might be a startup or a brand who's only got X amount to spend on comms and publicity. But I think it's a bit like if you see an advert for a new film at the cinema, you'll see it on the side of a bus and you think, okay, maybe. Then you'll see it on a billboard and you think, oh, I might go and see that. And it's the third time that you see it that you think, oh, actually, yeah, I will go and see that. And it's the same thing. You have to, a nice page lead in the paper is fantastic, and it will get the reach. But then if you can supplement that with something online or back it up with social media, it just reinforces the message. So if you've got 1 million people that see your campaign in a newspaper, and then they see it on social media, and then they might see it online, that's 3 hits from the same thing. So I think it's always important to try and get as much bang for your buck as you possibly can.
And would you say, just, thinking about journalists, you sort of touched on this earlier on, there's less journalists in the industry. A lot of them are working from home, because we all have been. Are you having to provide them, let's say, more collateral, or what's your advice, to actually cut through and get the coverage that your clients need, that they're hiring you for?
Yeah, there's definitely less journalists doing more work, and the papers aren't as big as they were 18 months ago, although they are increasing again as advertisers come back and people start going out and buying newspapers again on their way to work. I think it boils down to knowing what a good story is and knowing which journalist it will work for at what paper. So there's no point ringing the Evening Standard for a story that's based in Manchester, which sounds obvious, but it happens. And you have to know what's right for the journalist and make sure you've got all the assets that are needed. So you've got the picture, you've got a case study, you've got a video for online. So because sometimes it's the picture that will make and not the story. Your story might be okay, but when you've got a journalist that's looking at doing 6 stories a day, 2 of which will possibly make the newspaper, when they go into when the news editor goes into conference and says, look, I've got the story, and the picture editor says, well, we've got a really great picture to go with it, that might get it over the line. So it's thinking multi-dimensionally when you present to a journalist, keeping it short, and I think having their mobile numbers. They're not in the office as much as they were, so there's no point going on to Gulkana and just looking for a switchboard and asking for someone or their direct line. You need their mobile number, and you need the contact with them, the relationship with them, so they'll actually take your call. I'm lucky that I grew up professionally with a lot of journalists who are now in positions of power, who they'll at least take my call. So it's maybe a quarter of the job done, but then you still have to make it relevant to them, because they have to go and sell it to their news editor or their business editor or their entertainment editor, who then have to go into conference and sell it to the editor. So there's sort of 3 chains before you even get considered. So you really have to make it as powerful as possible and know the language that the journalist is using. Keep it short, keep it snappy. They haven't got time to read 6 paragraphs of a story before they get to the main point.
Sam, it would be great to get your sort of input here. So obviously Adam has talked quite a bit about that some of the trends that he's seeing is that using multiple mediums in terms of reaching your client. You obviously, when you introduced yourself as an integrated specialist, using multiple mediums, whether that's influencers, digital, social, I think is something that's core to what you do. It'd be great to sort of get a take from you as someone who works very much on the consumer and entertainment side, in terms of what changes you've seen in the last 12 months, but also the trends that you anticipate happening, looking forward.
Yeah, I think Adam made some really good points. So about having, video, pictures, etc. So you've got content to really make the story, and it's definitely that of, for print, they're going to want a photo, but if you want the story to also run online, a video or multiple images, because the websites want to keep people on the page reading. So the more content you can give them, creating infographics to bring the story to life, but then how you can also use those and put those on your social media channels as well. So, as Adam says, people are seeing the story in multiple places. And if you create some really powerful content that they see in a newspaper, and then they see on a website, and then they see on your Instagram or on your TikTok, you're really hitting people from sort of all angles. And it's, with online advertising, it's always about retargeting. So they say that, someone's got to see that ad 3 or 4 times before they actually want to go and purchase. And it's exactly the same with reading or consuming information about a brand. you know, and especially more so when we haven't been able to go out and do events. And, you know, stunts have always, as Adam said, have always been really great when they're done well and they're authentic and there's a clear link back to the brand as to why they're doing that. But we haven't really been able to do many of those in, you know, the last couple of years. So there's definitely more of a switch to how can you create something that's stunt worthy digitally and creating some really powerful content that people want to share and engage. I saw a really great campaign that Walkers did with an agency I was freelancing with, where they just did a campaign about, are you crisps in or out of your sandwich? Just created a video about it where they had a comedian and he was like FaceTiming a couple of celebrities in it. Obviously that's quite big budget and they have those budgets, but even on a smaller scale, just creating something around that debate and getting people sharing that video and sharing their thoughts and opinions is something that you can bring the consumer into that conversation. And likewise with journalists as well, that, you know, they can write something like that with their opinion on whether they're a crisp in or out person. So it's, you know, you're not just thinking anymore about what's the journalist interested in and why are they going to write about it. It's equally the consumer as well. So you've got different messaging that you need to get across. One is direct to a journalist and another is direct to a consumer.
And just, it'd be interesting to get your thoughts, Grace, on this, obviously as a brand marketing specialist. I know some of what Samantha's raised is some of the changes around the sort of events industry and experiential experiences, etc. It'd be good to get your thoughts.
Yeah, sure. So just touching on sort of the content production side of things, and as Adam said, getting more kind of bang for your buck in terms of content production. I think what's really key is for brands to be focusing on how they can repurpose content. So not just how they can repurpose kind of press releases and journalist pitches for other channels, but how, for example, if they did produce a sort of piece of video content like Samantha mentioned, how can they then optimize it for the different channels that they're situated on? Certain channels require kind of longer form written content, for example. Other channels prefer longer form videos, shorter form videos, really looking into the insights behind those channels and the audiences that are on those channels and what they want to see and what they are willing to consume and how much attention they can give to it, and using those same kind of ideas but breaking them down into different ways so that you can get as much as you can from that one piece of content and that one idea. So that was just touching on the kind of content production side of things. When it comes to experiential marketing, obviously we've seen a massive drop in that. Well, in terms of, you know, face-to-face in-person marketing, we've seen a rise in virtual events. I think coming into 2022, as long as COVID doesn't come back the way it is in Europe, we would hope to see events and experiential marketing kind of on the rise again. First of all, I guess talking about the sampling side of things with experiential marketing. So very early on in my career, I was a Red Bull Wings girl, which is their field marketing program, driving around in the Red Bull Mini, giving Red Bull cans to people who needed energy most. And to me, that's genius. You know, you're attracting people at the stage that they need your product. You're building awareness with people, likability with, you know, a campaign with a lot of personality, trust, because that, you know, that face-to-face interaction with a person is so vital for human interaction. Relevance, you know, it's not just about sampling, going outside a train station and just handing it all out. I think strategic sampling is the way forward, where you're giving it to people, giving that product to people when they need it. And then loyalty, because again, they've had that face-to-face interaction, they've had an experience, they haven't just been kind of talked at. And so when it comes to kind of products that are focused on the senses, so smell, taste, touch, I really can't see how we can kind of move away from that experience side of things and the experiential marketing side of things. And then again, when it comes to kind of more events, event experiences rather than the sampling side of things, you know, humans are a social species. So of course, these are never going to die. There's always going to be the opportunity for a brand to get in there and appeal to their audience in a place where their audience are open to relevant products and services and things. Virtual events were great at the time. I think they were a really innovative way of companies promoting themselves and also giving people something to do when they didn't have anything to do. So fun and innovative, exciting at the time. But I think, you know, people, as I mentioned before, are really looking to move back to human face-to-face interaction where they can actually experience and sense things, smell things, touch things, taste things. Like, I wouldn't buy a perfume if I couldn't smell it, for example. Yeah, so I think that's where experiential is heading.
Thanks, it's interesting. You obviously talked about sort of broadly experiential, but all the different elements of marketing, and although not purely part of marketing, but it can be used as part of it. Susan, for example, it'd be great to sort of have a little bit of a chat to you about sustainability. So I know that you are a sustainability consultant. It's an area that you specialise in. We've obviously had COP26 summit that's been stealing a lot of the news and headlines recently, and sustainability is sort of at the core about what's being talked about. But sustainability obviously isn't something that's just related to the energy or climate industry. And just, you know, we've talked about branding and more broadly, it'd be good to sort of hear from you in terms of why sustainability is important for brand, you know, why they need, you know, why it needs to be part of the dialogue, and then really what advice you would give brands and communication consultants who are looking to build that into their messaging and offering.
Yeah. I think probably the first thing to say is that we are probably about 18 months to 2 years behind, you know, where we should be in terms of sustainability generally, and particularly in the energy transition. I mean, sort of getting our carbon emissions down. And that when we talk about carbon emissions, you know, that it really, you know, it refers to just about every industry you can possibly imagine. I don't think there's anybody that you know, doesn't produce carbon. And because of COVID, that really dominated the news agenda, you know, really up until, I would say, sort of, you know, July of this year. In terms of why people, companies and brands, you know, need to get on board, I would say one of the first things is consumers, you know, are starting to want to purchase products which are responsible, which are sustainable. I mean, there is starting to be a real sort of groundswell on that. So it also employees, you know, they want to work for companies that are responsible and have got their environmental, their social, their governance, you know, issues that have all sorted out. And then one of the really big ones, of course, is around finance. You know, investors, banks, you know, pension funds, all these things, you know, are now starting to hold brands accountable for their carbon emissions and for their sustainability, and even beyond that, I mean, in terms of social and governance issues as well. So, for example, I've been working recently with one organization that is trying to better the lives of miners in the DRC in Africa. They're actually producing a lot of cobalt, but I mean, the state of the places that they're working in and living in really are absolutely horrendous. And organizations like Volvo and Tesla and, you know, things of those, they're now holding, you know, companies, the mining companies, you know, to you know, answer for that. So I think it's around sort of responsibility, and I think there is only one way to go now. And it's really moving forward with that. And then the other thing, the big thing is, I suppose, you know, we have a very short window now, you know, to get to 2030 and to get those carbon emissions down. we were hoping to, keep, climate change, climate warming, if you like, to 1.5 degrees. I think it's going to take an awful lot of work to do that. I think we're possibly going to tip that over that. So, we have about 8 or 9 years to really, get that sort of resolved. And certainly by 2050, I think most of the world's sort of mature economies need to be carbon neutral. So
obviously, Adam talked very much at the beginning about, a key trend is about messaging and authenticity. I would have thought if we're looking, we're talking about sustainability and actually the importance of brands looking actually at themselves and being accountable and looking at how they can weave or ensure they are sustainable, and the benefits you talked about in terms of communicating to their customers. How did they do that in an authentic? How do they do that in an authentic way? But also perhaps if I'm a freelance consultant, communications consultant, working with my client, and they want to look at messaging or building in sustainability. How can I ensure that my client is authentic?
Yeah. I think you really need to ask sort of, the rigorous questions that often terms of greenwashing, which I come up, against an awful lot. I mean, none of the clients I've worked with do that. And I probably wouldn't if I suspected a client or, a brand of doing that. In terms of how they go about making sure they aren't, typically it's the appointment, at board level to get a sustainability board member who is responsible for that, and you can drive that through the whole organization. I think you need to ask the rigorous questions. I think it's just making sure that they can demonstrate, they can prove what they're doing.
Brilliant. And slightly different, but obviously if we're thinking about sustainability, but there's obviously key influencers that are within the sustainability area, but generally across the board. Something you touched on earlier on, Sam, I know you work with lots of influencers although in a very different industry. Is working with influencers has had some criticism. Some people have said, does it work anymore? It'd be great to get your take, looking ahead in terms of actually how businesses potentially can be working with influencers moving forward.
Yeah, definitely. And with influencers, it goes back to that authenticity that, you can go and work with a, celebrity with big followers, or someone who's a purely influencer that's got 1 million followers. But if it's not an authentic partnership, people are not going to buy into that. Consumers are really savvy as to they're being paid to do this. And actually what's more powerful, and actually, Disney with Disney Plus has a big focus on it, is your micro influencers. So the ones who they might only have 1,000 or 10,000 followers, but their audience are really engaged with them. And, they might not necessarily cost you any money. They might just cost you providing a free gift or looking at an ambassador program with them. So I also have a startup business that I set up last year of a dog accessory business. And with that, I work with micro influencers where they have a discount code for themselves, and then they have a follower discount code. And they are constantly posting about my brand on a weekly basis, buying products, sharing pictures of them in their products. And that drives more sales than me paying or going and gifting, a dog influencer with 1 million followers. So it's if you've got, say, a watch, for example, and you go that's targeting men, and you go and find a male influencer who's got 100,000 followers, and you gift him a watch, and you probably pay him for that post, and you might get 5,000 likes and 100 click-throughs, but you might not get any sales. But if you go and find someone who is a watch enthusiast and they write reviews about all of the watches that they have purchased or they've seen, and you just gift them one or loan them one, and then they're going to talk about that product in detail, that 100% of their followers are interested in watches. and therefore you're going to get more engagement off that because it's more authentic and people will believe more about what they're saying and the product that they're promoting.
We've had one of the audience, Sandy, had asked, can influencers drive sustainability? And another question Sandy's asked is, how do brands drive sustainability within the supply chain? I think I'll probably ask you, Sam, the first, and I think perhaps you, Susan, might be able to answer the latter.
Yeah, so absolutely. I've done some stuff with the Body Shop around sustainability with some influencers, and also with a company called Planet Shine. And, you know, there are a lot of celebrities out there who are really putting themselves out when it comes to sustainability, like Leonardo DiCaprio, for example. Robert Downey Jr. has just sort of stepped up, and there's one of the guys from McFly. So there are people out there that are already doing something, but it's almost, you know, 10 years ago, celebrities were like looking for a charity to back and give their support to. And I think that's now also becoming sustainability as something. But, you know, going and, you know, I think I'd heard from someone that Jason Momoa was going and having talks with some of the large businesses from a sustainability front about how he can work with them. So, you know, there's a great opportunity there of talking to agents or influencers to find out what they're passionate about when it comes to sustainability, and if that ties in with your business and your brand and what you're trying to do. And, you know, then if you've got that authentic partnership and someone who's passionate about that subject, then that's definitely going to help to have an impact.
And Susan, I don't know if this is an answer. Sandy'd also asked about brands driving sustainability in the supply chain. How do they do that?
Yeah, that is typically done through something they call science-based targets. So science-based, I don't want to get too sort of technical here, but science-based targets are sort of commitments that companies make to either see through the emissions reduction sustainability through their own organization or through the supply chain. So there is a specific sort of target that you can sign up to that does require your organization to go right through your supplier, you know, chain to make sure that they are living up to your expectations. And it can also be sort of, you know, going forward as well. So yeah, that's really how most companies do that.
So obviously we've talked about some sort of key things, key trends, whether that's messaging, authenticity, changes that are happening within the events industry. Obviously, a lot of the events that have happened in 2020 have happened in 2021. I think another big thing that's sort of been in the headlines with, you know, Black Lives Matter movement returning to the national headlines is diversity, the importance of diversity. And I know Samantha, as a fellow dyslexic, you know, you rightly celebrate neurodiversity, and I sort of wanted to get your take in particular, sort of thinking ahead to 2022 in terms of, yeah, really, you know, why it's important, how clients can benefit from it. So yeah, be good to get your thoughts.
Yeah, so yeah, I mean, something we talked about the other day, isn't it, that, you know, I spent most of my career as a dyslexic person thinking that I wasn't as good as everyone else. My writing necessarily wasn't that good, my memory, etc. And in the more recent years, I've realized what I bring to the table and how I think differently, and that I can see that you know, we're both dyslexic, but we can see the bigger picture. We can problem solve a lot quicker. So while everyone's sitting there scratching their heads and, you know, debating something, we've already solved it and got the answer. And, you know, I've been mentoring someone who's starting his career in PR who is has Asperger's, and my sister's autistic. So I, you know, can kind of understand the way that he thinks, but really trying to help him to celebrate what he brings to the table, but also to help him to acknowledge how he has to work a little bit harder because of the weaknesses that he has, and, you know, how he can adapt the way that he works to really thrive in this industry. But obviously, you know, neurodiversity is just one thing. It's the PR industry is still very white, and you know, I've seen some agencies that I've freelanced at are starting to do mentoring programs, and you know, working with, you know, relevant businesses that are out there trying to help BAMEs get into the industry. And it's, you know, I think it's very middle class PR as well. You know, I come from a working class background, and some of the agencies I've worked in that I've happened to weave my way in, whether it's from freelancing and then going permanent, have seen that there's no way I would have even been considered for a job interview based on my education. So I definitely think that sort of thing has to change, because PR is, you know, one of the biggest things. Right? Yes, writing is a key part of our role, but you know, I went on a lot of writing courses from, you know, my first job. I was really grateful that they supported me in that and put me on the training. But that, you know, creativity is something that comes naturally to you. And I don't think that's necessarily something that comes as part of your education. That's almost in your DNA. And I think, you know, being able to help other people to get into this industry can only make it a better thing.
No, I agree. Liz, I think it's interesting just hearing you talk, because I think there's sort of two things that come to mind is that, you know, one, absolutely, we need more diversity in the industry. If I think about, you know, our community and freelancers more generally, I think one of the wonderful things about freelancers is that actually, because quite often they come from different backgrounds, a lot of people work remotely, so they're based in different parts of the country or different parts of the world. They work with lots of different companies, so they do bring innovation and fresh thinking. But another is around, you know, if we look at the industry as a whole, it's made up of a diverse range of different individuals with different skills. So you talked about, you know, your strengths and also your weaknesses. One of the things that we've certainly seen during the last year is increasingly freelancers collaborating. Now, I don't know if that's because their business, you know, one, freelancers is booming. They've been slightly ahead of the curve in terms of being able to work from home and being productive. Or actually it's just a natural evolution of freelancing and how the world of working is changing. But yeah, you know, freelancing collaboration is obviously a way that different freelancers can connect and collaborate together. So it would just be good to get, you know, your thoughts on that. If you know, from a freelance perspective or as an independent perspective, you know, how do you work with other individuals, Samantha, and how you see that evolving, you know, looking forward?
Yeah, definitely. So some of my clients, it's just sort of me working with them, but others I actually have 3 freelancers on a part-time basis that work with me that all have different skills. So there's someone who's got you know, really strong lifestyle media relations, and they're sort of supporting me on a couple of my clients with the media pitching. Of someone else who's helping me with social media on a client, you know, just because the drafting content calendars is quite time consuming, and that frees me up to take on some more work by having someone to support with that. And then, you know, also going back to my sort of integrated comms background of, you know, with a couple of startups is something that I've talked to about, noticing a gap of where they don't necessarily have the budgets for, you know, a marketing agency or a marketing person on board yet. So they're starting with PR and social media, but I'm spotting there's opportunities where I can help them, for example, with, you know, SEO for their website and blog posts and things. So I have an SEO specialist that I work with and collaborate as well on some clients. So definitely for me, it's, you know, one of my friends is signed up for the work crowd as well, and we together saw this brief that we thought, she has skills in one area and I have in another, so why don't we collaborate together and pitch for this bit of business, because we feel that we would stand more of a chance if we were doing it as a team as opposed to going on our own. And then obviously we weren't pitching against each other as well.
Yeah. And Grace, I mean, it'd be great to hear from you. I mean, I think as someone who is a brand marketing specialist, particularly, actually, there's huge opportunities to collaborate because brand infiltrates across the whole of marketing, communications, and PR, and it is really sort of central to it. You know, it would be great to get your thoughts.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the marketing industry and the branding industry is huge. It's vast. There's so many different channels now. There's new channels popping up every day. One person can't know everything, so it's hugely important to collaborate. You know, I'm not a PR specialist, so I would collaborate with a PR or a video producer, for example. I don't produce video, so I would collaborate with somebody like that. But also in knowledge sharing, I think with COVID and you know, obviously people working from home, there's been a rise in online co-working communities. So, you know, to offer support to people, to offer a bit of relationship, there's been these communities popping up, and they've been great in that, you know, you can get together with hundreds of other freelancers that if you were just going down to your coffee shop or to your local co-working space, you wouldn't have met. So that's been an amazing way to meet people, and actually something that's been really positive that's come out of COVID and online working.
And just talking about online working, you know, obviously thinking about client relationships, I think traditionally freelancers have been great at working from home, but everything has gone online in the last 18 months. And have you seen any changes in terms of how you work with clients or how you manage those client relationships? Are you doing more face-to-face now that we can, or is everything still very much online? And do you think this is going to, you know, change moving forward?
Yeah, I mean, face-to-face is picking back up again. With everybody realizing that they can work online, obviously the pool of people that you can work with has increased. So you can work with people that are further away in different countries, and I think people are much more comfortable with that. But I think what's really important is that people have realized again that they can work online, and that it actually is so beneficial to them in terms of their work-life balance, and, you know, the flexibility, and also how people work with their own circadian rhythms. You know, people, not everyone is a 9 to 5. I sometimes work, you know, 1 o'clock in the morning, or I come up with ideas when I wake up in the middle of the night and I get my phone out and start writing them down. So I think it's really important that we don't fall back into that same trap of the traditional, you have to be sat in an office at your desk in a 1 meter square box between a certain, you know, a certain time frame. We must, as freelancers as well, we must drive this, and we must encourage our clients to continue to allow people the flexibility, because it increases productivity, it increases, you know, your mental health, it increases your ideas. You know, being stuck in a box and working within certain restraints, I don't see how that's good for anyone, but people are so accustomed to it, and they're just kind of, oh, let's rush back to the office. I think there's a real fine balance to strike between having that face-to-face interaction, which is super important, especially with like creative sessions. I think they're better face-to-face, but let's keep that balance going, and let's allow people to continue to have that balance in their life.
No, I couldn't agree more. And it's interesting, you know, our sister company, Hanson Search, did some research around it. They spoke to about 3,000 communications professionals, and that was the resounding feedback, is that people are looking for that. So I think it's going to be integral moving forward. It'd be great, just as a sort of, I'm conscious of time, and I want to sort of, you know, we've got some questions, hand it over to our audience. From a sort of brand marketing perspective, just to get your sort of, let's say, what you feel are going to be the key trends, predictions looking at 2022, where people are going to be focusing their efforts, or changes that might be happening in the industry.
Yeah, so I think, as I mentioned earlier, product-based kind of sensory products, important to get product into people's hands. So I think more face-to-face interactions, people have been missing it. I think in terms of big corporations, this is kind of touching on something newer, but obviously within COVID, there was the rise of kind of supporting small businesses and supporting local businesses. And I think a lot of consumers have become more and more aware of this and more kind of conscientious about who they're buying from and where their money's going. So I think if this starts to fade away, I think the smaller businesses will need to be focusing on partnerships to increase their visibility and increase their awareness so that they can compete with the bigger budgets of big brands. And then on the other side, the big brands, touching on what Susan was saying and what Samantha was saying, they need to be focusing on this message of ethics. So touching on what consumers want, they are becoming a lot more conscientious with their purchases. So yeah, and that authenticity, as Adam mentioned, is vital.
So as a quick fire before we hand it over, I want to ask all of you very, very quick, what's going to be hot and what's not for 2022? Adam.
I hope we have more experiential, big, fun stunts that make great pictures and great news. It'll be good to get that back up and running again.
Grace?
I would say conscientious marketing to the conscientious consumer is going to be hot. And I think unnecessary, time-consuming in-person commitments and meetings about meetings is not going to be hot.
I like it. Susan?
Again, looking at sustainability, I think carbon labeling is going to be going to start seeing more of that. So consumers can actually specifically pick their groceries or their beauty products or whatever based on how much damage or not it does to the planet.
And Sam?
I think affiliate programs, so where brands are using backlinks to websites to be more measurable, especially with PR, and online news websites are looking to be more commercial and only including them if they're an affiliate partner, as well as affiliates with influencers. I think brands are going to be looking at that a bit more to drive traffic and sales, but also for media as well to be driving more revenue as ad sales have been declining.
So just so really then, thank you guys, appreciate it. And in terms of questions, Alison has got a question of you, Grace. So you talked about online groups that you've used to collaborate with other marketing freelancers. Have you got any favorites?
So there's one called the Co-working Club, which is a really creative space. The names escape me. There's another one that I can remember. Hopefully I can circulate it afterwards because I can't for the life of me think of the name of it at the moment. Sorry.
If we haven't got any other questions, then
I think there's some in the comments.
Let me just have a... Okay, yeah, okay, so this in the general chat. There was a comment about Green Jumper Day. Apparently today is Green Jumper Day, which is designed to focus on climate change and the actions that we take to improve the world that we live in. And someone else has shared that they're a member of a network group called PR and Pint in Hampshire. So that's quite a nice one. Any other comments or questions that we've got here?
There's one maybe for Adam from Ursula.
If you could share that, if
yes, so in Germany, the decline of print media is massive. I don't see this reversing. Any thoughts?
I think it's a really good point. In 10 years' time, will there be as many newspapers around as there are today? maybe not, or it may be that they combine. So you know, the Sun on Sunday, the Times, the Sunday Times, a lot of them are, the Sundays and the dailies are collaborating, which they weren't doing 2-3 years ago. Will they disappear? No, I think there is always a need and a want. There's always something nice about sitting down at your kitchen table and opening up a newspaper, not having to click on, click off, click on to the next one. I don't think you read as many articles in the online versions as you do as a newspaper, because when the newspaper's open, you can scan each story, even if you only read the first 3 parts or the headline. And I still think clients love to see their name in lights in a newspaper. I think it still counts for a hell of a lot. So I think there will always be newspapers. Will there be as many? I don't know. But I think there is a real need, and there's a real delight in sitting down and reading a newspaper. Everyone should do it more.
Thanks, Adam. Well, thank you all, and thank you for everyone who's joined. If you do have any questions afterwards, then please do ask them, and we can filter them to our panelists. We will do a sort of write-up, and there'll be a video recording of the event as well. So do feel free to log back in if there's any bits that you've missed or want to share. So thanks, everyone, and enjoy your weekend ahead.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.